Narcissistic personality disorder is where things get a lot more serious and extreme, and this is Homelander. NPD is not just a personality style, it's a structural psychological condition, a rigid, total organization of the personality built around protecting the person from an unbearable core self that they cannot afford to feel. The grandiosity, the entitlement, the contempt, the inability to take accountability, they're not just one-off behaviors. They're load-bearing walls, and the whole structure of who they are depends on them. Someone with NPD is not just vain. They cannot tolerate being seen as anything less than perfect pretty much ever by anyone. They're not just sensitive to criticism. Any criticism is experienced as an existential threat, and they respond with rage, contempt, distortion of reality, or destruction of the person who threatened them. You see that a lot with Homelander. Stan Edgar, the CEO of Vought, tells Homelander plainly that any respect he can give him would be wasted into a
bottomless, gaping pit of insecurity you call a soul.
And that's the difference. A-Train has a soul that's buried underneath those defenses and conditioning, and the question of his arc is whether anyone can reach it. For Homelander, there's just infinite, bottomless insecurity, and the system is closed. He does not take feedback. Look at Homelander's backstory. He was raised in a lab, no mother, no father, no attachments. No one ever loved him as a child. They only used him, studied him, conditioned him to be a weapon. And he grew up to be the most powerful being in the world, but also the most psychologically empty. And so here's what the show gets right about NPD, is when you watch what happens to Homelander across the seasons. He doesn't grow, he doesn't get softened by people who love him, he doesn't get better, he only gets worse or stays the same at best. Every time something threatens his self-image, every time someone sees through the facade, every time he fails at being who he thinks he is, his response is not self-reflection, it's escalation of his traits, escalation of his habits. He becomes more controlling, more violent, more paranoid, and more convinced that the world is the problem, or the people around him are the problem, and he is the solution. Every time the show gives you a glimpse of something that might be human in him, the defenses slam back over it within seconds. And he's willing to kill the people he supposedly loves most. Stillwell, Black Noir, A-Train. This is the pattern of severe NPD. The defenses get more rigid under stress, and they're not flexible. Therapy is usually not effective because the person cannot tolerate the conditions that therapy requires. They cannot tolerate being accurately seen. They cannot tolerate being wrong. They cannot tolerate the inner contact with anything underneath the false self.